Hello, friends. Welcome to another KFS Knicks Film School live stream. I'm here with the one and only DJ Ace ZULLO. DJ, I just realized Andrew just told me that it's the first time we're actually meeting on a screen. Now, we spent a lot of time together on chatting about basketball.
If that is not a 2023 statement, I don't know what is.
True, exactly right. But this is truly an honor and a privilege to be here with you.
Yes,
because, my friends who are watching, if you ever wanted to talk to two guys who love watching basketball and breaking it down, a great time to do so is when there's no basketball being played. We are here for you to discuss anything you want to talk about. We'll even answer questions about the salary cap. We just may have to text Jeremy Cohen on the side to figure it all out. But we will answer them to the best of our abilities. But before we begin, before we take any questions, I did just see some breaking news. I wanted to, just came across the wire. I didn't want to break it here. DJ, I don't know if you've seen this yet. Damian Lillard might want out.
Really?
But he might not. He might not want out.
So what are you saying?
Broken by Woj and by Chris Haynes. They both said that he might. It's possible that he might want out. I don't know if you have any thoughts, but that's where I wanted to start.
So we're back at. We've never left square one, right? We've kind of been in the same spot, a couple steps one way, a couple steps back, kind of in the same spot right now. Listen, I don't know if we differ on this, but at Dame Lillard at his age, what he's done, the fact that he wants the perfect basketball spot, I don't hate on it. I think he's kind of earned this right. And yes, it's a little nauseating to kind of go through this over and over again, but I don't know, man.
There it is, flashing along the bottom line. It's flashing along the bottom. That's great, Andrew. Breaking news: Damian Lillard might want out of Portland. And DJ, I'm glad we're starting here because let me start right away with the disagreement.
Yes,
I am hating on it. I am so sick and tired of this story. We are 5 years in of Damian Lillard simultaneously trying to convince us that he's the most loyal person in the universe, whilst also constantly dropping hints that he wants to leave. I am tired of it. We get it. Just go to Miami. Enough. And by the way, this we could talk about. Him on Miami is a very dangerous situation for the Knicks and anybody else in the Eastern Conference, in all seriousness. However, I want it to happen. I've had enough. I've had enough.
Well, I don't know. There was a report, it just came out a few hours ago, that he's looking for a dream scenario, according to Sam Amick, to remain in Portland. That is Jeremy Grant. That's Draymond Green forming whatever you would call that, a pseudo big three, whatever that is. Listen, I get it. From your perspective, it's a lot, but I think that unfortunately Dame is in this spot of like trying not to be Kevin Durant, where he's forcing his way over to a super team, but he's also trying to remain loyal at the same time. So it's tricky, and I feel like it's a lot of this hate should probably be disseminated towards the media and the fans and this ring culture, because that's sort of fueling what Dame is trying to sort of thread the needle with a little bit. I mean, yes, he deserves. I wish he would just pick a lane and stick with it. But
pick a lane, Damian.
It's hard, man, because whatever he does, he's going to get the hate, right? So he's trying to, like, if he's going to leave, at least he didn't. He had to go because Portland couldn't make the moves, couldn't give him a title contender. So it's tricky. I don't know, but I get it. I want it to come to an end. But if it comes to an end with Miami, maybe we can kind of delve into it as we move along. You alluded to it, man. That threesome would be hellacious.
It would be.
It's kind of perfect. So
they complement each other perfectly, those three, in a way that I don't think we've ever seen in like the big three era, as it were. I mean, I guess you go back to the Lakers.
Original one. Yeah, Lakers.
Even the Miami original one, like I do think there was some Wade LeBron overlap that, I mean, the talent was so through the roof, at least when Wade was healthy, that it didn't matter. But to have the point guard, wing, big three is a very rare commodity in the NBA. I would probably go back to like Magic, Worthy, Kareem. As an example, obviously that's a higher level. I mean, we're talking about some of the best players of all time, at least two of them. But that's the kind of thing where it just seems so perfectly complementary. I mean, I guess Steph, Clay, Draymond in some way is kind of similar, but it's that would be a hellacious big three. That
Not sure if we lost Benji there, but Andrew in the chat.
Are we there?
There you go. You cut out for a moment.
Sorry, everybody. All right. I guess with that, we can get going with the super chat.
Hold on. DJ was reading my suggestion.
Yes. Well, Andrew puts it in the chat. I mean, Garnett, Pierce, Allen, to his point, that is, in terms of complementing each other, that's about as good as you can get. So that would probably be the best analog to a Lillard, Butler, Adebayo big three in terms of like modern NBA. It's a good one. I mean, it would be tough. I mean, I don't know how they would have to be amongst the favorites, but I think Miami's got a lot of work to do to try to make that happen, because I don't know if Portland necessarily has a lot of interest in Hero, but we can maybe get into that later on.
Yeah, I hear. All right, good. So with that, I think we can start welcoming the super chats. Let's get going with it. Let's hear what everybody here has to say. I know you guys are all very bored because I have seen your tweets and they are terrible. So let's get it going with the super chats. Kareem Myrie, thank you so much for your contribution. What up, KFS? Much love from Fort Lauderdale. A Southern Floridian, as we're talking about the Miami Heat. Would Kuminga for Obi make any sense or not? Here we are. This is peak off-season Kareem question right here. We love you for it. I'm going to let DJ start with this one. So what do you think, DJ? Kuminga for Obi trade.
It doesn't make sense only because of you're left in the same position in terms of the minute allocation. I mean, Kuminga is not going to generate the minutes to warrant a move in that situation. And frankly, he probably doesn't space the floor enough in the Knicks offense right now to make that a worthy trade. Now, in terms of player to player, if I'm just put in a vacuum, I actually probably like the upside of Kuminga a little more, but right now he just isn't. I mean, when Obi plays, he's a good player, and Kuminga right now he's just too rough around the edges. Though as I mentioned, the ceiling is, in my opinion, rather high. But again, if you make that trade 1-for-1, you're in the same position. He's a power forward, probably big wing 4-3 that you're going to have to try to figure out how to get 20 to 25 minutes out of. And you just, with Randle there and healthy, it just isn't going to work out.
Yeah, I agree.
Idea, though. Yeah.
From a Knicks perspective, I think the problem would be the minutes. And then also, look, if you had, I think Kuminga, maybe at least the realized version of Kuminga, has a better chance of playing a small ball 5 type position than Obi, just because of his just size. Although Obi's very athletic, just Kuminga is more fleet of foot. You can be a little bit more versatile. He's definitely stronger. Yes. Yeah. So I think theoretically, if the Knicks were ever play that way, I think that would be an interesting wrinkle. But we know the coach that we have. We know the way he wants to play. Whether it was Kuminga or Obi Toppin, he's not going to play small ball 5. So these guys will be pigeonholed into that 4 spot where there are those very limited minutes where the Obi. Now, what's interesting is you do reset, I guess, by a year, that you don't have to make the decision as quickly if you're the Knicks about extension eligibility and such. But I just don't really see the fit 100%. And on Golden State side, do they want to extend Obi Toppin, or would they rather see one more year of Kuminga and make a decision there? I would probably say the latter. I don't think this would, even from their perspective, make a ton of sense, because they don't need the spread as much as the Knicks do, right? The Knicks are desperate for that shooting that Obi has started to provide. Kuminga doesn't provide that. But on the other end, Kuminga gives that Golden State that strength and athleticism. And when it's going right and when he looks good, you can see why they're so high on him and why they selected him in the first place. I'm not sure Obi fits in the same way. I do like Obi's pace with that Golden State unit for sure. Yep. I just don't know if it quite fits as well as the realized version of Kuminga.
Yeah, I would agree. And now just say if we can just kind of hang on one point, because you had mentioned it, or you had talked about it before, about Obi's lack of strength and sort of how that limits him. And his finishing numbers really took a dip this year. And I know we've talked about it before. To me, and there are certain things about Obi's game in terms of skill wise that kind of leaves a little bit to be desired. But the fact that he's never really developed NBA level strength to play the 4-5 to me is the biggest issue, kind of holding him back a little bit, because it kind of affects everything. It affects the ability to maybe be a little more versatile in terms of if you had a coach that wanted to play him at the 5, I don't know if it would work out in any way defensively because of the limitation strength wise. And then as a finisher, he just can't go through players. It's something that it was an issue coming out of college, and it's never really become something he can lean into. How are you viewing him in terms of like that limitation, how that affects everything about his game?
Yeah, I remember posing the question in our KFS faculty room, which was like, are we sure that Obi Toppin's an elite finisher? I think we throw that out there and almost as an assumption because he is so athletic, obviously, and that was the whole rep coming into the NBA was one thing we know is he'll be an elite finisher. I'm not sure that's really translated. Now, there is some opportunity explanation to that, like what kind of rim reps is he getting? He's not a roller very often. He's not getting to just like kind of catch and explode very often. It's usually attacking a closeout where there's more help. All can be kind of factors as to why it hasn't translated the way we thought it would. But I absolutely agree with you that he can't really hit you on a jump and then finish. Haven't seen that a lot. He has to be able to kind of explode over you in order to finish. And I think that does limit him in certain ways, and that does go kind of to the strength point. And Kuminga is an interesting contrast because I think I'm not looking at Kuminga's finishing numbers right now. I don't know how they look. But at least when I've watched him, that's a guy who, if he gets up in the air with you, he'll knock you off and finish. That's not to say he's a better finisher than Obi or not, because, again, I'm not looking at the numbers right now. But it's an interesting contrast that this question kind of poses is two kind of fours. One doesn't stretch the floor yet at all. One's starting to. They both are very athletic players, but in different kind of ways. And so it's an interesting thought exercise. So thank you very much for the question. We appreciate it. We got Ben, Kim Gervey. What's up, Ben? Benji, the much younger. I assume that means I'm younger than you, Ben, but I don't know how old you are. So.
You're younger than me too. So, I mean, it can go both ways. I don't know.
But Red Holtzman's older than everyone here.
He is.
All right, noted. Thanks for doing this. Imagine if we leveraged Hartenstein passing at the top of the key. Oh, what actions do you see, and what do we need to make it happen? I have a feeling that Ben is preaching to the choir here, but DJ, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's two things. I don't know if the offense necessarily. We know the offense isn't utilizing his skills to the most of its ability. But I think the problem is, and this has been one of the biggest issues I have with sort of the Knicks under the Leon Rose regime. They don't have a lot of natural cutters. And I know you can sort of build in cutting naturally or artificially into an offense with just the way you function, have more of a motion style. But to me, a lot of like great cutting teams, like we talked about Dwayne Wade earlier. I mean, he is the poster child of like a guy that could just see a seam and just be able to time that cut perfectly. Then, of course, he had great passers to sort of take advantage of that. Hartenstein, you have the passing, but do the Knicks, I mean, other than Grimes, who can do it every now and then and is pretty good at it, and Josh Hart is actually a pretty good cutter, they really don't have they don't have a lot of great cutters. And I think if you don't have that, you're sort of limited. We know Randle, he's not doing it. RJ just has never been a great cutter. That's not Jalen Brunson's game. So you're really, where is he? How are you building in this offense that's going to be centered around utilizing that Hartenstein passing ability? Yeah, you can sort of go to a little more, and they did sort of in the second half of the year a little bit more. But to me, it's more of a knock on the players that the Knicks have. It just isn't part of their game. And to me, cutting it's instinctual. It's something that it's hard to teach. I think that's more the issue with not utilizing that passing skill, which we know is great. We saw it with the Clippers, but hasn't been a thing. I think that's part of it. And I don't know how you necessarily coach that into your team.
It's a great point. You look back at if you go back to his film with the Clips in his final year there, who was the guy he picked up so many times on that back door? It was Terrence Mann. And Terrence Mann, to your point, is an excellent cutter. That's what he does. It's probably what he does best. And you're right to point out that the Knicks don't really have that guy. What's interesting is that if you close your eyes and think about who did he assist most often on that back door for the Knicks, it was Deuce McBride. He hooked up with Deuce McBride several times, even despite very limited minutes, when Deuce and Hartenstein played together. And I think this, again, goes to your point, because I think Deuce is a intuitive cutter. And he was able to kind of slip that back door several times. I would say 4 or 5 times this season for layups when he got the opportunity. So it's a great point. The Knicks don't necessarily, almost every Knick, other than Quentin Grimes, the instinct is to come around to the ball. We have a lot of guys that like to come around to the basketball, and maybe Obi as well, who can be a good cutter. I think again has kind of accepted the corner role maybe too readily and too seriously and too literally, and sometimes needs to vary a little bit. And that goes to, it is a bit of a rigid offense. It's a standstill offense in a lot of ways. We see RJ flash to that middle from the weak sides here and there off a Randle double team. They are good at cutting off the post because they kind of have those built-in reads. When Randle has it, he draws two, or Brunson has it, he draws two. They get a cut from the weak side. They get a pin and screen on the other side, right? You can kind of visualize all. They do that well, but kind of just like spontaneous cutting around the big, trying to go backdoor, they don't do very often. I also think that there are absolutely things they can do to utilize it more, despite what you just said. And I think, look, you watched Miami play. How much delay action did they run? And for those who don't know, delay, you could visualize it because they did it almost the entire series against the Knicks. Bam Adebayo has the ball up top. There are two players on each side of him. They come together. You can pick out a dribble handoff to either side. One guy maybe cuts back door. You try to find and unclogs the lane too for the Knicks, who have that spacing issue, right? So you can run delay where you throw Hartenstein the ball at the elbow or at the elbow extended and let him make a decision. Even if you don't get a ton of backdoor action, what I would love to see is more IQ coming off. Jalen Brunson coming off of Hartenstein would be powerful to me. Just as a dribble handoff option off another screen where you maybe get him a couple of steps of an advantage before he receives the ball. Quentin Grimes coming around to shoot the way Luke Kennard came around Hartenstein to shoot with LA. They had a great connection, not really on backdoors, but just as a DHO shooting opportunity. So it's a little bit of both. I think the Knicks do need to vary their offense. I think one of the ways to vary it is to empower Hartenstein to make more decisions on the top of the key. I think Thibodeau is terrified of somewhat of a turnover propensity, but I think you have to let him go a little bit. And I do think it loosened a bit in the second half of the year. I'd like to see more of it. Take this one, DJ.
All right. Well, Benji, you're the man. I agree.
You shouldn't have taken that one. That's awkward.
It is. But you are the man, so I'm happy. I'm happy to say.
Andrew, could you come on and take this one too?
Benji, you're the man. What's one step forward for any of the younger guys that would push them to the next level? Like RJ shooting 38% from three, or Quentin Grimes developing a dribble pull-up? Keep up the great work, Benji and DJ.
Thanks, Sergio. Wow. That's so nice. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And you should take this one first.
I'll take it, I suppose. Yeah. Yes. That would push them to the next level. I wasn't listening. I was just basking. Great question. I just because you bring up Quentin Grimes, I want to see Quentin Grimes driving to score. I think that would be a massive piece of development for the Knicks this year, because here's what he has down: catch and shoot, very confident, especially in that left corner where he's going to spend a lot of his time. He could shoot that anytime he wants. I'm happy. It's a good shot for the Knicks. That blow by baseline, he's got it down. He can blow by anybody. You have to respect his shot. He's there. So I know that those are two givens. He's going to make 38% at least of his threes. I could see that even ticking up next year. We'll see. And I know he's getting into the lane on the blow by. What happens next is the next step for him, because right now it's a lot of looking to pass to hit that drop off, which he did early in the year. I think teams kind of caught on, started playing the pass a little bit more and daring him to go up and score. So I think that ability to drive, and then first option is always get up to the rim, because he's an explosive leaper. Get up to the rim and finish. And if that is taken away, only then is there a drop-off pass? And if that's taken away, then it's the opposite corner pass, right? Like, that's the progression for a baseline drive that he needs to ingrain into his mind, because he can finish up there. Like, he's got the hops to do it. He can finish on the reverse side. It's a mindset thing for me, where he just has to convince himself, I can go up and finish with the guys. And then if I can do that and draw the defense, force the defense to play that, that's when my passing really opens up.
Right, because he's not like a super athlete necessarily. Like, if you tested him, like, he's not going to test like one of the best athletes in the NBA. But the fact that he's a 1 foot leaper, almost exclusively, it really lends itself into the half court finishing, and he's strong enough. I mean, he's going to get stronger, and to me, he needs to sort of dive into that game a little bit more. So I couldn't agree. And then just kind of sticking with him a little bit. You had mentioned the shooting off the catch. I want to see him sort of utilize a little more movement into his, and this is something this is a offensive issue along with him as well. He is so good shooting to his right because he's sort of a right pocket shooter. So it's very easy for him to get into alignment going right. And it's something he did at Houston all the time in college. And one of the things during the pre-draft, I kind of honed in on him so much because he had that high release point, and then he had a little more versatility to his shooting than he's displayed so far in the league. And I know that's part coaching, but that's also, I think he's got to explore that part of his game a little bit more. Then, Sergio mentions RJ. I mean, if he gets to 38% roughly and becomes a threat as a spacer, I mean, listen, he's going to be a high usage guy if he's on the team. We know his driving ability in terms of the volume, and I think the finishing is going to get better. But the sheer volume of drives, and if he can take that passing ability that he showed a little more in the playoffs and bring that into next year, his driving overall game is really strong. You add in the fact that he could be a 38% 3-point shooter. To me, that would do a lot for that offense, and he's done it before. And I really feel.
Yes, I was going to say we have seen this.
His second year, he did. Yep.
Yeah.
And I just feel like. Right? Yep. I mean, that's so. And then I think the second half of his third season, he shot pretty well, if I'm not mistaken. But I just feel like he's going to will himself into being a decent 3-point shooter off the catch. I feel like anytime there's any movement need in terms of his shooting, everything kind of breaks down because he's not a natural shooter. He doesn't have great touch naturally, so everything's got to be very rigid. He's a very robotic shooter, but you can get away with that off the catch, and especially with Randle and Brunson drawing the attention that they will. I feel like it's good enough. Couple that with his driving ability, and then you have a really good offensive player. And then it's the defense is another issue to get that back up to sort of league average. He's a third option on a really good team, and I think that's where he needs to go. I mean, those are two good ones, and also I would love to see Quickley just sort of expand on his shooting game, because he's really been more of a catch and shoot pull up game. Is there any more movement you can coax out of him as a shooter? Because that really just loosens things up for an offense. Any more movement or any more movement you can get out of your players, I think it's good. So they're young guys, so it's certainly something that they can not be a huge weapon, but just be something they can go to every now and then.
It's interesting. My counter to the Quickley point, I don't know if it's a counter as much as a response, is I actually just think he needs to shoot better. I think for him, because he just needs to be better on catch and shoot, and he needs to be a little bit more of an automatic threat on the pull up. Like if you go under or a guy's in drop, he just needs to be knocked down, and he does it in spurts. Last year there were spurts where he was a really good shooter. But I think for him to kind of reach the level that we want him to get to, because I don't think he's improved so much as a driver. Mm-hmm. He's improved so much at getting to the line as a passer. He has. I don't think he'll ever be an elite driver of the basketball. I think to if there's really like a star potential there, I think that comes from becoming an elite shooter, not just a good or pretty good one.
Right, be more Anthony Simons than what he's been. Like Anthony Simons is you compare the two players. I mean, Anthony Simons is not near the defensive player, but he's an elite shooter in terms of the range and in terms of the versatility and all the different shots he can make. I would agree. I mean, that's if he can become a legit knockdown shooter from pull up. Yeah, that would be a huge thing. So yeah, if he adds that and becomes more consistent, then he's going to be a phenomenal player for many years. I would agree.
Are we going to extend him, DJ?
I
hate to put you on the spot.
I don't think so. Just because.
Really? Okay.
I think it's more him. I don't think he has a starting. I don't see he foresees himself to be a starter here. I don't think the Knicks necessarily view him as a starter alongside Jalen Brunson.
Right.
And if he's going to get his payday, his ceiling as a earner, it's going to be a starting point guard somewhere else. personally. And listen, is there a number they can get to that's sort of bridging the gap between where he wants to be, where the Knicks are comfortable? Maybe. But if I had to, like, right now, I would say it's close, but maybe slightly in the no category. How about you? What do you think?
I'm going to say yes. Because if nothing else, what I think this front office has shown is, like, this whole family thing is very real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just signed Obi's brother, like to kind of really put a hammer or nail, whatever it is. But like, they drove it home. They drove home the point. This is a family. We're going to sign your brother. Quite literally. It's they take care of their guys. They've taken care of everybody so far. Quickley is their guy. His first, right there, their first year, their first draft. The guy who's really blossomed in this regime. I just think they're going to get something done. I don't have any reason beyond that. You're right that there is some dissonance between how the Knicks view him and how he likely views himself. And I think that's fair on both sides, actually. So I think you're right to say that would be the driving force behind it not being resolved this season.
You could pay him starter money. I mean, you could do that and it would be fine. You could just do that and listen, and then maybe you figure out a way to, like, you can't pay Quickley enough to where it's going to be a bad deal. I just don't think that's it. He's good. He's good enough to where even if you're paying his number, it's a tradable deal. It's probably a valuable deal that teams are going to want. You can always get off it. I mean, I didn't necessarily give enough thought to that point. You're right. Taking care of it. I mean, that's what the Heat do. And the Heat get saddled with some contracts that they necessarily don't want, but they figure it out, right? And it's probably given them the benefit of the doubt and sort of some cachet amongst agents, amongst other players. It's not a bad thing.
No, it's that's kind of where I think they'll find the number just for whatever that number is. I do think they will, but who knows? I mean, who knows? It could certainly see it going the other way. All right. I'll take this one because it's about you. Is DJ ZULLO actually a DJ? The question of the night. I don't know the answer to this question.
I am sadly, I mean, I would be much cooler if I was a disc jockey. Unfortunately, in a previous world, I did work in radio, which made this whole very confusing to introduce myself to people. Believe me, no, it's a boring David John. Unfortunately, nothing else to that. My musical tastes have not moved past 1993, so I could be your DJ. It would be a lot of Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins, and
sounds like a blast.
Listen, I'll let you think you are not knocking Pearl Jam. You're not knocking.
No, not knocking Pearl Jam. Just knocking DJing with Pearl Jam. That's all.
That wouldn't be too fun. Yeah, it's not necessarily going to be playing at your wedding. Put it that way.
Wow, this is hard-hitting news coming here. Dame Lillard might leave Portland, and DJ ZULLO is not actually a DJ. Wow, this is incredible stuff. There it is on the bottom line. All right, what's the next question? Here we go. Dan Hidalgo. Thank you, Dan, for the contribution. We appreciate it. Dan's always here for us. Don't know if this was covered, but how do you feel about the new CBA? Oh, yes. Good direction for the NBA. More parity. Yeah. All right. I can take this. I'll take this first.
Go ahead.
Although look, as you all know, anybody watching this, Jeremy Cohen is our man to break down the new CBA. It is not either of us. We are a bit, I should speak for myself. I am a bit of a novice when it comes to this stuff. What I will say, my first reaction to it, and as we've learned more, it hasn't assuaged my fears about it, which is that of all the things that we should penalize in this league, owners spending more on their teams and trying to win is not really one of them to me. Like, that seems to be ultimately the focus here, is to penalize the high spending teams more harshly. And to me, it's like we didn't address the bottom part of the league that isn't trying to win, which is, to me, the worst part of the league. And we focused on the part of the league that's really trying very hard to win. Now, there's a parity argument to be made. This playoffs was very interesting because of the parity. Now, obviously, I think the parity will increase. I think I think that is going to be a byproduct of this. Unless owners just say, screw it. Some of them are so rich, it won't even matter. I mean, I could see the Clippers spending whatever the hell they want.
The Suns are doing it right now, right?
The Suns are, yeah. I guess that is the goal. But to me, that was kind of my reaction to that. And as anyone who follows me on Twitter knows, I'm like, I really like tanking is like, to me, like it is evil. It's actually evil. So that's always where my focus would be in terms of like trying to legislate around this league, how we can make it better. The regular season continues to lose value. There's a lot of the incentive structure seems to be out of whack in the league in a way that I think damages the product. That would have been the focus for me. I don't think the league has any issues due to the fact that we have had dynasties. Like I think the league, despite the fact that maybe there were a couple of playoff runs where the Warriors where it wasn't that interesting because you had the Warriors going there every year. I don't think that hurt the product. I think there are other things that are hurting the product that aren't necessarily being addressed. That was kind of my initial reaction.
Yeah, I agree. But now just to play devil's advocate here for a second, are you in a better scenario for a league if you have a team like Orlando? They might not be the best example, but even a team like Indiana that actually sees a pathway. If this parity thing does sort of work its way out and we really are in a era where you could have every single year 10 to 12 teams with a legitimate championship ceiling, and in those 10 or 12 teams, you might get an Indiana every now and then. You might get a team like Minnesota if things really work out, even this upcoming year. Are you a healthier league in that way? It's like the NFL model where you could every few years you have a turnover and you have a new sort of block of teams, unless you have a quarterback that is just transcendent. You can have more parity. Is there an argument that is actually a good thing, and this actually could work out where you have a fan base from coast to coast and everything in between interested in what this league can bring them? I mean, of course, right now you really don't have that. You haven't had that in years.
Well, we just had Denver.
You just had Denver. I mean, what had to happen for that? A legendary draft pick, right? I mean, a transcendent.
Right. Well, look, I mean, you have to draft well, and they're already taking advantage of those rules, right? So they'll tank when they have small markets will tank when they have to tank. They do. The Spurs just did it. They got their transcendent star. Cleveland had LeBron for how many years because they drafted him, and then he came back. But like that was unique. But like it's not like I'm not blind to the fact that there is a disadvantage to small market teams where free agents aren't likely to sign. That said, I think there have been enough examples. I mean, you obviously go back to of teams taking advantage of the current construct. Spurs dynasty, Detroit, Cleveland. I mean, Indiana was good for years. It's not like the teams haven't had success. Small markets, Oklahoma City, and to me, it's like they've had success. I don't feel like we need to give them more opportunity here if we're already allowing the tanking scenario to take place. Like that's their pathway, and they've taken advantage of it, and there have been success stories. And like I don't know, I maybe it's because I'm a Knicks fan and I'm a New Yorker. Like I push back against the idea that we have to bend over backwards for small markets at the expense of trying to win.
Yeah, I agree. I totally get where you're coming from, but I don't know what else you do. Like, what is the other option here when if you're a small market, you're Indiana, you need to bottom out and you need to get the first pick. You need to get the second pick. Maybe you get a transcendent star drafting second Kevin Durant. Pretty much, it's really the first pick. If you really want to go year by year in the draft, the transcendent stars are drafted one. If you're not doing that, then what is your pathway? You're not getting any free agents to go to Indiana. I'm just using them as an example because they are the poster child, I think, for the team that is not drawing anyone in there. They haven't really bottomed out to the point where they haven't really had a chance to draft in that upper echelon. I get it, but what do you do if you're Indiana? I mean, is your only pathway tanking? And then that's like you hate tanking. You've made that clear, and I agree with you. I think it's just the worst thing you could do as a in terms of it's an entertainment product. You've mentioned this before, and I agree with you. So if you're openly tanking, you're damaging the product, but I don't know what else you do. And maybe in this new CBA, you have brought the ceiling down for teams in 2 and 3 years to come down to your level a little bit to make it more advantageous to be in Indiana, to be in Orlando, to be a team that can maybe have a fighting chance. Right.
That's certainly the counter. And you're right. And it's fair. And you can't, in some ways I'm arguing on both sides of my mouth. You can't argue that they shouldn't be tanking, but also that we need to allow teams to spend whatever they want to spend. I guess I see under the current, right, because we're currently operating under the previous CBA.
Yeah.
I see a lot of success stories in small markets, even without tanking. I mean, Utah didn't tank. That was a team that, I mean, it wasn't built perfectly, but that's not because they didn't have access to talent. They built an extremely talented basketball team without, you have to hit on a draft pick somewhere, but not necessarily 1 through 5.
That's a good point.
You look at what Cleveland just did. I mean, they built through the draft. They did get the second pick, but they didn't have to trade that pick. And that's not even they built up their assets. They made a trade for a guy and gave themselves a shot. It didn't work out in the first round, thank God. But again, there are models here of teams that didn't have to necessarily full on tank. Even look at, I mean, you're going back a little bit, but Indiana making the Eastern Conference Finals a couple times against LeBron, could have made the finals very easily. That wasn't a team that tanked for any super high draft pick. The models are there. It's doable. It's really hard.
Yeah,
Again, there is a disadvantage. If you want to make it that every team has an equal shot, it's not necessarily I don't feel like that makes a better league. I understand I'm a Knicks fan and I have advantages as a Knicks fan that other teams may not have, but I do feel like under the current construction, we still had enough variety, small market, big market, that made it. We didn't have to go this far, but I do understand the other point. I think it's fair, and it's an interesting conversation either way.
Can I jump in?
Please do, sir.
Because
with your Mets hat.
Yes, with my Mets hat.
What's their payroll right now?
Listen, it's a tough time at the moment in Mets land, okay? But this is not Mets therapy. We're talking about literally anything else at the moment. So I think there is an important distinction to what you don't like, Benji, and it's not necessarily teams rebuilding, which has happened forever, which is how you build the market, how you flatten the odds a bit. And that's, I mean, Silver tried to get rid of tanking by flattening the lottery odds, and it just meant more teams like Portland were just going to figure out, pick a point in the season, and then they were just going to start losing, But what I think you don't like, Benji, which I agree with, but also we've discussed this a lot throughout the season, is teams that could fight to be an 8 or a 7 or a 6 seed, and then deciding, you know what, we're actually going to hold back because we want as good of lottery odds as possible. Because if you don't need to bottom out all the way, just get the 7th best odds or the 6th best odds, and you may end up with Scoot Henderson, like what Portland did. Where I actually do think we've seen forever the Cleveland situation where it's all right, we were good, and then we're rebuilding for a couple of years. We're building through the draft, and then the moment we start to get good, we make an all-in trade for Donovan Mitchell. The Indiana example that you bring up, DJ, Indiana's had one top 10 pick in the last 20 years. And it was what was it, last year when they took Mathurin? They've largely built through the middle of the draft, and they've been one of the more success stories that Benji's talking about, in that what Hinkie did in the extreme of I'm gonna trade anybody that's a hint of value because I want future picks and to be as ass as possible. That is something I reject. Michael Carter Williams wins Rookie of the Year. And then a year later, when the marketing department for the Sixers is all right, well, we got one of our stars, right? And he's no, I'm going to trade him away because we can get, I'm only looking at players as assets. That I think is what, I hate more. And I think what you hate more is that as an entertainment product, this young team could win more, but an organizational effort to lose more exists. Instead of what we've seen of this team, the Pistons this year, I don't think they could have won more. They decided at a certain point, we're rebuilding, and our cap on the season was 22 wins. Cade's hurt. So rather than him fight to try to get to those 22 wins, we'll settle for 17. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think, look, I might prefer just the wheel or some other, kind of draft or no draft at all, certain things that have been pitched. We don't have to get into kind of all the details. maybe a podcast on its own, kind of the best way to do this and run the league. I don't think that it's necessarily the best thing for the league anyway. I think there are other ways maybe to come to some sort of parity or give small markets a chance if we feel like we have to do that. But yeah, I think there comes a point like for OKC next year will be an interesting test case where like they've done this for 3-4 years now, or I think 3, I shouldn't say, I think 3 years now, and they've gotten a lot of talent, and I think they're ready now to start winning. And I guess they did to some extent last year. Do they go for it now? Like at some point, do you owe it to your fans to try to actually start to win games? I think, and there's a balance there, and under the current construct, I think you can find it, I guess is my point, without resorting to this. The shame of it to me, I guess, having this penal, their second apron, whatever it is not necessarily like, I think a lot of these super teams that have been built in the last 5 years have failed miserably, spectacularly, right? Like it's hard sometimes to build that and make it work, especially because some of the superstars that want to move around are hard to build around for various reasons. What the shame of it to me is if like a team does build through the draft or drafts well and now is scared to sign all of the guys that they developed, and because they have a fear of that second apron. Like you've done it the right way. And now what do we do? Can we sign? I don't know what the example would be, but like, a team that's coming up now. I mean, hell, the Knicks now. I mean, how can we extend all of our guys? Can we extend Quickley, Grimes, Obi, and like just keep this going? And we're going to have to sign Brunson to this max contract. Like, can we do that? We've done it the right way. We built the right way, but like, this is so penal. I'm not sure that they can.
That's good.
It depends on what the owner's willing to spend in the end of the day, which is hard. Yeah,
and I think a team like Houston's going through it right now, where they're rumored to be interested in Brook Lopez. I mean, obviously James Harden. So you do that move and you bring in a big salary or two. Next year, Jalen Green's up for an extension. Sengun's up for an extension. And then you're in this situation where if you get 4 of these rookies to hit, and that's might be a higher percentage in what will actually happen, but you're going to have to start making really tough decisions where you may not be able to sign Tari Eason when he's due for an extension in 2 years.
Right. And so those players get spread around the league,
right?
And that goes to the parity point, and it will achieve that. And it will achieve that. But I'm just not sure that's necessarily, I guess that's kind of where I come out.
Good stuff so far from both of you. And
thanks.
I think you guys are doing such a good job that I would go as far as to say that your analysis is more than meets the eye. And that is on behalf of our friends at Oakley, who have been so kind to us over the last month. Shout out to our friends at Oakley. And we're going to take a quick break and welcome one Mr. Jonathan Macri to tell you why Jalen Brunson this season was more than meets the eye.
Hey, what's up? Jonathan Macri here with our good friends at Oakley to tell you why Jalen Brunson's incredible first season in New York was more than meets the eye. Is it that Brunson became the first point guard in Knicks history to average at least 24 points a game? Is it that he became just the second player in NBA history to average at least 24 points, 6 assists, and under 2.5 turnovers? No and no. It's that he did both of those things all while playing on a below-market contract that will become even more valuable under the new collective bargaining agreement. So yes, we should all be very thankful that the Mavericks had to find out the hard way that Jalen Brunson is more than meets the eye.
Thanks, Oakley. We appreciate you. All right, let's move on. Next question coming. What do we got? Hamd M. What's up, Hamd? Thank you very much for the contribution. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening to you. Thoughts about Randle's pod interview? Seems like a different guy than the player on the court. Not watching film. DJ, I think I saw you comment on the interview, maybe.
I
take this one. Go ahead.
Sure. So, I mean, this goes back to Chris Webber, and so just in terms of like him being a different guy than he was on the pod versus who he is on the court, and it just reminded me of Webber in this sense where he would play with a scowl the entire time. And I don't know if you look up any Chris Webber highlights, even when things are going well, like he was never smiling and just seemed like an angry guy most of the time. And then when you would interview him or you would talk to him, and then he's become a broadcaster in his post NBA career, he is a genuinely wonderful, jovial, happy person. And I think Randle falls in that category where every time you see him off the court, he's personable, he's affable, he has a great sense of humor, he's got a great laugh, he's funny. He just has there are certain guys that have the same sort of disposition on or off the court. He is not one of them. It is night and day. And I think it's nice to see him. I don't know if it ended up going 2 hours. It might have been, but it was just a really nice window into him as a person. He was just very laid back. And Paul George, I mean, to his credit, he has not been doing this for a long time in terms of the podcasting interviewing, but he really gets guys to open up. I thought it was a fantastic interview, and there was the mention to the film watching where Randle alluded a couple of times to where he's not a film guy, but then he also contradicted that in a few different spots, saying he had become more of a film guy later on in his career. So, maybe he is not in the upper echelon in terms of watching film, compared to other NBA players. I know he made mention that he does do it now, and I feel like that is certainly something that every player can take advantage of, and it's a benefit. And I don't know necessarily how to compare that because I don't really have a window into anyone else's film viewing in terms of like what his contemporaries are doing. But I mean, obviously film watch for a player is critical, and I'm sure he is getting fed clips from the Knicks, from his trainer on a daily basis, if not, maybe weekly basis, in terms of things that are maybe some things you got to work on in the offseason or just some priorities going into next season. But overall, it was just a really cool way to see Julius as just a person. He just seemed like a really fun guy to just hang out with. And he really had a lot of good stories about his Laker time, which I thought were phenomenal. Was there during the famous Kobe blow up with Nick Young, where he was Kobe saying, I don't know, you guys aren't doing anything for me. That whole practice situation, Randle was actually getting taped up or was in rehab at the point, but he heard what was going on the court. So a fantastic interview, but I think the film stuff did get overblown a little bit because people kind of hung on to the fact that he said he didn't watch film. But then, as I mentioned, he did go back and say that he does watch now. And I just feel like every player is watching some level of film. It's too easy to get too easy to send clips back and forth. You can just watch them on your phone, right? So I'm sure he is. And, maybe he's always got something new every season that he's going to come to. So maybe the fact that he hasn't been playing on the court for a while during this rehab, during this injury, maybe he is upping his film watch, because that's the one thing you can do when you aren't obviously on the court playing.
Plus his burner follows both of us, so he gets plenty of film that way, right?
That is true. Yes.
Yeah, of course. One thing I don't think anybody can possibly say about Julius Randle is that he hasn't grown and evolved and changed his game over the course of his career. I would argue perhaps one of the most unique development stories ever. Now, maybe that's not a result of watching film. I would guess that part of it is, but this is a guy who at every stop, sometimes multiple times within one stop, has had to significantly alter the way he plays. He went from basically a full-time slasher roller at a college, even into LA, at the 4 position, turned himself into a part-time 5, stretch 5 with New Orleans. Comes to New York, has that 1 year that was a wash, and then becomes a mid-range, Kawhi Leonard type shot diet player. And then has to change again. And the Knicks again significantly altered his shot diet this year. And he does it. This is not a guy who's too stubborn to change. He has changed as much, if not more, than any player in the NBA playing today. So I don't, people call him stubborn, or on the court at times he might be, because he at least in terms of he doesn't play fast. But to me, that has much more to do with just a skill and processing speed than it does with a guy who's not putting in enough time. Julius puts in all the time. Guy works extremely hard. You can't do what he's done in his career, let alone come off the injury that he came off of and in his first game. And then change your game as often as he has, to as much success as he's had. There are criticisms to be had about Julius Randle. I have made and levied many of them one of the the amount of time he puts in or effort or focus, like I don't buy. Maybe effort on defense sometimes, yes, but like effort in preparation, I can't, just because of one clip on a Paul George podcast. I'm not there. I'm not going to go there. This is a guy who gives the game all the attention it deserves. And whether on the court persona aside, and there are issues there, and like he does get in his own head, and he does process the game tick slower than you want, and he doesn't often or always give the requisite defensive effort. I don't think that's because he doesn't care. I think it's whatever. It's other things. I think some guys have a great motor, and he doesn't necessarily all the time. But like, right. I don't know. I didn't like everything that was made of that. I think that was kind of silly. I just don't. I think that's not giving him enough credit for what he's accomplished. He
couldn't shoot coming into his career, right? I mean, he literally couldn't shoot. He was a non-threat, and he's turned into a guy that can incredibly make step back threes and score 50 points in an NBA game. I mean, he is a phenomenal. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you finish, please go ahead.
No, I mean, you said it. He's a legendary in terms of the skill development from where he was coming into the league to where he is now. It's so unique, and 6'9", 250, the way he moves, the way he can get in and out of his 3-point shot is just, it's incredible. It's not, he cares. He's a very serious competitor that has major flaws in terms of processing speed, and there are certain things that the way that his disposition is something that you have to take into account. It's not an ideal disposition on the court. It just is what it is. You're not changing that. You just have to work with it. He's not a perfect player, but who is? And for what the Knicks are, they signed him to a contract that he is. I mean, it couldn't have worked out any better in terms of this past season. We want the playoffs obviously change. We'll see. That's a different beast, but
yeah. And not even just on the skill development side, like we still get frustrated about that. Maybe he's slow to handle a double. That's actually not, to me, the issue. I actually think he's improved a ton at handling doubles, and I think the numbers actually back up that he's a very successful player out of double teams. I think he's really improved in his reads. Like, and that has to include some film watching. Like, that's not just, I mean, experience is the greatest teacher, and he's gone through it now, and he's learned from that. But also, like, if you don't think he's like breaking it down and watching where his reads are, and he's figured that out. Like that season, 3 seasons ago, the entire offense was built around him reading double teams, and they were pretty successful at it. Like they made the playoffs with that. Obviously, mostly built on a defense, but their offense was good enough, and it was all him. That whole offense was him creating. So, no, this is a guy that I think is putting in the work in a pregame setting. I'm not getting there. All right, go ahead. You take this one, DJ.
Yeah. So this is Juan Sex Fiddy Juan. Thank you for that super chat contribution, and thank you for allowing me to say your name. I mean,
I'm strategically handing these off. Buddy,
I see that. Offering over the top praise and Juan Sex. There you go. Thanks for those assists. I appreciate it. Were you a pastor in college? I don't know.
Absolutely not.
Only when you had to, right?
Just putting them up, baby. Just putting them up.
All right. Will the Knicks get similar or less value for Obi than the Hawks did for Collins?
Ooh.
So we should say that it was basically a salary dump going. So Collins going to Utah for Rudy Gay, a straight salary dump for the Hawks, right? I mean, there was nothing in terms of value for the Hawks other than cleaning up their cap sheet. So
I think that's right.
I think if you're basing on that, I would say the Knicks will get more value for Obi, because I don't think the Knicks would trade him if it would be a commensurate situation. So, I mean, it's shocking in terms of where John Collins was a couple of seasons ago in the playoffs against the Knicks, and the fact that he's been in trade rumors for how many years now, that this is what they had to do. But listen, they have a DeJounte Murray extension coming up. They have to worry about a Kongu rookie extension. Sadiq Bey's got a contract extension coming up. They had to clear that space out. So this was a strict salary dump for all intents and purposes for the Hawks. And they're also going to free up some space to play Jalen Johnson. So we'll see how he can take advantage of that at the 4. So I would say that the Knicks would pretty comfortably, if they were to trade Obi, get more value than a strict salary dump situation. Even if it's like a couple of seconds, it's just going to be more value, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if Obi's yielding a 1 year pre-extension. Obi's yielding a first. I don't think so. But he's probably getting a draft pick, second rounders, and you might be able to get like a player in a similar boat where like just not working out. Like I mean, Duarte is the first guy that comes to mind, but that trade's been floated before, right? Like you can get a similar age player who hasn't, just needs a change of scenery, maybe open up a rotation spot, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I would agree with you. And that's not necessarily to say that Obi's a better player than John Collins.
It's a contract situation, right?
It's it's a contract, and it's the Hawks, frankly, just bungling this. I mean, they could have traded him 4 different times. They've been dangling this guy for 4 years now, and when you do that long enough, you project that he doesn't have any value, and they didn't take deals that were probably out there because they wanted more. And sometimes you end up with this,
right?
Get into a desperate place.
And it was widely reported that Landry Fields, the GM, had a mandate to get under the luxury tax. So, I mean, if you have that, and you're obviously the one contract everyone's going to point to is the Collins number, then you're not going to get any value for that.
Teams can smell your desperation, right?
Absolutely.
They know.
Yeah. So, just before we transition, though, I would love to hear your thoughts on this Utah front line right now. So, John Collins, Lauri Markkanen, I assume is going to be your 3, and I assume Kessler will be your 5 starting.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, Lauri has wing skills, so I think the offensive fit personally would be fine. Defensively, it's another situation. But how do you view this new look? Assuming everyone stays, this Utah front line.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Can they trade? I don't know the rules. Can they trade Collins? Like, is he definitely playing for Utah next year?
Yeah, I mean I assume they could trade him, and I did wonder if he was just gonna,
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I'm not bought in unless I'm missing a cap rule that I don't know. But I'm not buying in that this guy is necessarily starting game 1 or playing game 1.
Let's assume there he is starting, and that's front line.
I probably wouldn't start him. Because they also have Olynyk. Jeez, it's crowded. Doesn't really make any sense, frankly. But he's a creative coach, Hardy.
Yeah.
Offensively, I don't really love it because, like, John Collins, the whole value. Now, his 3-point shot fell off a cliff.
Right. Big problem.
But, like, his best value is he is a phenomenal roller and finisher. That's what he does best. And not having Trae Young to be the feeder is going to hurt him a lot, by the way.
Yep.
But that was a pretty dynamic duo. I don't know. I would guess he comes off the bench with Olynyk, because then Olynyk can stretch. You could probably play Kessler. I mean, they're all versatile, right? I mean, between Lauri, Olynyk, you have 2 guys who can really play stretch, and then you have Collins can kind of get more time. I'd probably separate Collins and Kessler, I guess is what I'm saying. Right.
Yeah.
At least as much as I can, because I Kessler probably plays 25 minutes a game. I don't think he plays a ton more than that, maybe more. And maybe you split it that way, and you let Collins play with Olynyk, and that would be pretty dynamic. At least offensively.
Yeah, I think they're going to start them. And
all 3.
I think they're going to start all 3.
Lauri back to his small forward days in Cleveland.
He played a little bit of it this past season, and I think in terms of
like in Olynyk Kessler lineups.
Yes. And now if you look at him and just in terms of forget his size, but if you just look at his profile as a scorer, I mean, he's a wing. I mean, he does a lot of wing stuff.
Yes.
I mean, so I think it's an easy fit, or a pretty easy fit for it to play him at the 3. Now, the issue is if Collins, you mentioned the shooting, it really fell off the cliff. I think he was under 30% this past season.
Yeah. I know there was a finger injury or something.
There was.
Yeah.
So, but it is another example, right, of a team they're going big, right? There's been a few of them now, and Lowry's actually been in a couple. So he had the experience of that last year in Cleveland before the trade. So
yeah, I don't know. This reeks to me of an asset play by Utah, though, and like taking advantage of the fact that he was just like available, and I think they'll try to move. Lowry had the best year of his career and an all NBA caliber year at the 4. And I understand he played some 3, but like, why would you? I'm not sure what. I like John Collins. I think John Collins is a good player. I think he kind of took the brunt of a lot of criticism he didn't deserve in Atlanta. But like, you have Lauri in tow at the 4 of the super successful season. You have a rim protecting stretch 5, not stretch 5, a rookie last year in Kessler that was dominant in spurts defensively. I just don't really understand why you would make this move in terms of like, we need to bring John Collins into play. I'm just guessing, but it is an interesting thought exercise. If they do all play, I don't know what they're going to do, but I don't know. It seems strange to me from Utah's perspective.
It does seem strange, but I think you're right. I think they figured, listen, we're going to get a free player, right? That's got some value that we can always move somewhere else or see if it works and then make the move.
Before we get to Henry's second question, this struck me because John Collins has always been a comp for me.
Obi?
For Obi. Maybe like, I think when he first got drafted, I watched him in Summer League. I'm like, that's to me a really interesting, when Collins was shooting decently, like if we can get Obi to Collins level as a shooter, which I think he now is at, if that hasn't surpassed already.
Yep.
A really explosive finisher, but like in Atlanta's offense, Collins was given opportunities to screen and roll. That's the big, and to play at least not last year because they have Okongwu came and now it gets all the backup 5 minutes. But before he came and when Atlanta had a lot of success with him as a small ball 5, when Capella sat, that was always to me the best path to success for Obi. There are a lot of similarities, I think. Not the strongest guys, but really good vertical leapers. Collins developed a bit of like a face-up game, like one dribble max, like a little pull-up that he could go to at times that Obi hasn't had the opportunity, frankly, to show. But that was a good comp to me, and like his fall from grace here, it just has me wondering like the place of the traditional quote-unquote or the non-wing able power forwards in the league.
Right.
Like,
do you have to be like a Julius Randle type where you are a high volume 3-point shooter that has some playmaking ability?
Lowry,
right. And Julius actually said it on that podcast. He's like, listen, you can't be Carlos Boozer anymore. You can't be, I mean, that is an extreme example, right? But you have to be a threat. And John Collins, even when he's going well as a shooter, I don't know if he's necessarily treated like a spacing legitimate threat out there. So
or his success was dependent upon playing some 5, but he's not a rim protector. So
good point.
You have like the Draymond Greens of the world who aren't a threat, but forget about the playmaking side of it. But like, I can put you at the 5 and you can be a really good defender down there, and change the game that way. And if you can't do that, you can't slide to 5 and you can't really defend wings, which I don't really think Obi or Collins can do like really well. They're okay on a switch. Like they can hold up, but neither is going to be like, you're not going to be super comfortable with them guarding good wings or point guards. That is a position and the Boozer type, really. Like that is the archetype that seems to be falling out of favor in the league. Now, Obi developing a 3-point shot is going to help. And maintain his value. And I think obviously he does some things so well, like the transition stuff that he does, like the energy that he provides. There's a player in there that can be super valuable and useful. It is a bit of a wake-up call, this Collins thing, where like, that's a good basketball player who's had a lot of success in the league who just had no value. And that is crazy and kind of wild to think about. And again, the team context contributed to that, the desperation that other teams probably saw and that they had to get rid of him. Like, I don't think he has no value. I think the Jazz might create some value, but certainly not a lot of value. And that's kind of a cautionary tale for Obi. You have to find a way to contribute, whether it's sliding up, sliding down, because that 4 position, it almost just doesn't exist anymore. It's hard to find around the league.
I agree with you. And the last thing I'll say, you had mentioned both being explosive leapers. I will say it feels like, at least watching them, that John Collins is a quicker leaper getting to his apex, where I think if you put them both and you tested them in a empty gym, they would be very similar. But it just feels like Collins can get into his jump a little bit quicker than Obi. The low time might be a little bit quicker, and it just, when you're dealing with like nanoseconds, right, in terms of like when a shot blocker gets over and it's a contest at the rim. So I think that ability by Collins to get off the ground a little quicker is a difference between the two.
Great point. All right, let's move on. Handy, what do we got on player development? That's our wheelhouse. Here we go. How much can a player truly change in the off season? Who do you think on the Knicks will come back a different player? We touched on this a little bit. a player can truly change. We talked about, I just talked about Julius for a while, how much he's changed over the years. Absolutely. Players change every year. They improve. They change their games. They add elements. This is a tried and true fact. Guys improve in the offseason and come back different. Whether it's a shot, whether it's handle, whether it's strength, can totally change a player. Absolutely. It's real and it happens every single year. On the Knicks, I think all the young guys, I think everybody can come back a different player. I think there's every player has what to improve on this team. There are no Jokic's out there. So I think, we can go player by player, but who do I think will come back a different player?
Yeah.
I'm going to go Grimes. I think Grimes is going to come back.
Driving, is that the part that you think he could realistically improve on and be a viable weapon for him?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think, by the way, I think some of it is just like reps. He right now is at one speed all the time. There is no chill. There is no cadence. Like, it's catch and go and full speed to the rim and make a decision. I think that stuff will the game will just slow down for him. We forget he's basically a rookie last year. Like, he didn't play a lot in his first year, and like had a lot of success. He had a really, really good year in a lot of ways. So I think he'll probably build some strength defensively. We know what he can do. That's the guy I'm pinpointing as someone who will make a big step next year.
It's a good one. This is more of a specific skill set. But I feel like it was an issue definitely in the playoffs. I think if Mitchell Robinson can get better at when he generates an offensive rebound, just look for a shooter. If he did it a couple of times against Miami later in that, as that series moved on. But to me, one of the bigger issues he has is that if he's not dunking the ball, any sort of layup attempt is he was under 50% shooting layups at the rim for a 7'1" guy. That's an issue. So that he doesn't have touch in that way. So if he can just generate his 6 or 7 offensive rebounds and turn 2 of those into an open 3-point shot on the perimeter, I think that'll go a long way in diversifying that offense, because he's got such a skill to generate those second chances. And many of them he's just able to put back if it's a floater. But if it's something where he's not under the rim and has a clear finish with 2 hands, look out for the shooters and just try to develop that skill set, because I think it's something that I've seen him do it. It's there, but it's just sort of training your mind to sort of make that connection when he's able to finish with 2 hands strong, and when it's more of a contested layup, because when it's a layup contested for Mitch, it's not a great shot. That's one. I think it's a realistic one. I think it's something he can improve on.
I love it. That's our first Mitchell Robinson mention of the live stream. And by the way, he got better at it this year. It was his career best year passing the basketball, and I think that's really not saying a lot. But it's there, right? The improvement, like he can take steps there. I think a lot of it comes down to, especially on the finishing side, can this guy figure out not to bring the ball down? Like, can he figure out keeping the ball high? That's a strength thing. It's also just a fundamental thing. Like, literally, that guy should be doing Mikan drills 3 hours a day. Just keep the ball high. Like, you're one of the tallest players in the league. You go up and get that thing, nobody's there with you. And he has a horrific tendency to bring it down to his knees where you can hack him and he can't make free throws. And I don't see that improving that much, frankly. Like, this guy's not going to shoot 75% from the line. Like, best case scenario is probably 60, and I don't really see that. I think he just has pretty bad form, and I don't have a ton of hope there. Not for lack of trying or working hard. I just some guys just aren't going to be good free throw shooters. But one thing you can do is finish stronger and avoid going there by keeping the ball high.
I agree. And we haven't had the Mitchell Robinson workout videos yet, so we'll see. Maybe there is something else in the bag that he'll. I'm
sure they'll be very enlightening and encouraging.
And it'll be a full day on Knicks Twitter talking about the Mitchell videos.
Kevin Danishevsky, what's up, brother? Good to hear from you. Agree or disagree with the following statement? Knicks are a contender. If they trade one of RJ Randle, get back a 3 and D wing. The on-off numbers suggest so.
All right.
Go ahead.
If they let's say they trade RJ Fournier, and I know there's some cap machinations that makes this challenging, as Jeremy pointed out on the pod today. But let's just say they could figure out a way to get Paul George in the mix, and RJ and Fournier is your package, basically. I think they are a viable Eastern Conference champion if they make that move. And that means like they are, I don't know if they would be the third best team in the East or the fourth best, but I think you can come up with a scenario where a Paul George, Randle, Brunson, Grimes, Quickley, Hartenstein, that group, and maybe there's another signing in there in terms of the mid-level if there are another ancillary signing. That group can get you to the Eastern Conference Finals, and if you're going to the Eastern Finals, then you have a shot. I mean, maybe it's a 10% shot, maybe it's 5%, but I think you are a Eastern Conference title contender if you make that specific move, because I don't know if there's another 3-and-D wing that fits the bill, because LaVine isn't that guy on the obviously on the defensive side. I don't know if there's another guy that really makes sense other than Paul George, and there's some issues obviously with the age and the injuries and then the contract, but that's the one where I think if you make that move, you can talk yourself into an Eastern Conference Finals, and then you have a shot. We'll say you.
Well, the definition of contender has changed. They were almost in the Eastern Conference Finals this year. It's like I don't know. The East is really weird. It's only gotten weirder. I don't know what Philly's going to be doing. I don't know what Milwaukee's going to be doing. Boston made a trade that I think has a lot of upside, but has some downside. Marcus Smart was nothing if not reliable, and Porzingis is a risk.
Smart was probably their best passer. Not saying probably their best pure passer on the team.
Exactly. I mean, there's some downside there, and Miami just made the finals for God's sake. So I don't. Paul George is like a unique three. He's like a 3-and-D plus. He's. Right. The way I read Kevin's question was almost more like, I don't know, not that they can like get Cam Johnson, but like kind of someone like more like a really prototypical 3-and-D guy. If they maybe what he's getting at is like if we just like it's more complementary than RJ Randle Brunson, who I guess there's some redundancy, and we've spoken about that before. Even if they got someone like Cam Johnson or Bridges or who I think they are. I think the way the East looks right now, the way they played this year, Jalen Brunson being Jalen Brunson. Yes, I think the answer is yes.
I think it would have to be RJ though. I don't know if you can trade Randle for the regular season production that he's going to give you with all the issues in the playoffs
and get the seed you need.
And then get the seed you need, right?
Although
so
again,
I think it would have
you can't rely on that. I know, but it's just it does like it has made me reconsider a lot of stuff. But tried and true, getting a high seed is really important. It's a really good point that Randall's kind of the buoy of the regular season, keeping you the consistency, the games played, the production is really important. I'm with you there. All right.
Before we move on to the next one, can I ask a caveat follow-up? Does your opinion of a Paul George trade and their chances change if Miami gets Dame?
It's a great question.
And that team now exists in the East?
A little bit. But injuries in the NBA,
But you're trading for Paul George. As far as injuries are concerned.
No, 100%. But I'm saying, Miami would be the favorite, I think, in the East, although maybe Boston and Miami would be kind of co-favorite. There's some good teams in the East. I just don't. Miami, that's, Jimmy and Dame, there's health stuff there. You never know. It's still up. It's still out there for you. And if you get Paul George on your team, and you have a Brunson, you ran with Mitch and Grimes and IQ, that's a hell of a basketball team. I mean, again, if Paul George is healthy, which is a big if, but I think you're in the conversation. I do. I think it's fair to say you're in the conversation.
Be a fun regular season. I definitely agree with you there.
50 games of Paul George would be fun, yeah, give or take. Hamdy's back. You're the man, Hamdy. Outside top 3 picks, what other rookie do you like? Oh boy, Jacob Toppin, of course. What do you got, DJ?
Well, listen, I just did a hour and a half film session on Jalen Martin of the Overtime Elite. And my God, anyone who spent hours watching those overnight Overtime Elite teams, God bless you. You are a better man or woman than I am, because those are some rough watches. I'll just put it that way. But
where do you watch it? Where do you get it?
So there are some Synergy's got some games on there.
Okay.
There's some other, I think they have a deal with Amazon or Hulu. One of those two. They did have a
they do.
provider contract with some other outfit. But yeah, there are some ways, but it's not easy. Camera angles are rough. There's some random PA announcer that just stream of thoughts the entire game. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Listen, so guys that were actually drafted, I'm from Connecticut, and I know this is gonna be a little bit of a homer thing, but I love Jordan Hawkins, and I like him in New Orleans. I think they can get as much shooting as you can possibly get, and there's just something about guys that can fly off a screen and make shots. It's like there's a ton of catch and shoot guys. It's a prerequisite now in the NBA almost. A lot of guys can get pull-ups, but you really don't see a ton of guys like JJ Redick or Kyle Korver where you're just flying around a screen at 100 miles an hour and you're able to make a shot off the catch. Hawkins can do that close to that level, and I feel like it's a skill set that's gone a little bit by the wayside. So it'll be cool to see him in an NBA roster. I think he's a great fit with that team. I think there's some concerns with his body type. His his strength is going to be an issue. Anything inside the paint might be a problem for him, but he is such a phenomenal shooter. And I think for the Pelicans as a team, clearly going to go with Zion again. They're going to try it maybe a year. Maybe this might be the last year they go for this. But if you're going to have Zion and Brandon Ingram, you need as much shooting. So I think he's in a great spot, and I feel like he's just a fun offensive player to watch and almost like a dying breed a little bit. So he would be my pick as a guy that I just really just love watching. He's a fun shooter.
Love it. I'm the wrong person to ask. I've barely watched any of these people, to be totally honest with you. I will watch them once they're in the league, summer league. But I will say,
like 2 weeks, right? I mean, summer league scheduled. Yeah.
Right
Next Saturday.
He carved out the top three, so I'm going to go with Amen Thompson.
All right.
And the reason that I go with him is because what I have seen is someone who moves uniquely, like
special. Yeah,
that is, you watch a lot of basketball film and there are certain things that jump off immediately when you watch a guy who's special. And like, I don't know, I haven't watched the skill enough, and like, I don't know if the shot's gonna, like, I don't know, but what I do know is that guy moves different than your average NBA player, and that jumps off the second. If you guys haven't had a chance to watch highlights, watch them. Because it'll build some excitement to have this guy in the league, because it is a special ability to change direction, to get through space. It's pretty jarring when you watch it. So that's the guy. I'm just excited to see what he does. I have no idea if it's going to be good or bad. I haven't watched enough of him. I don't have a take on him other than I'm excited to watch him because it's a different type of athleticism that he has.
Absolutely. And his passing is another thing that is an outlier skill. I mean, I've heard enough people call him the best passer, and not only in this draft, but in last year's draft in terms of skill set. So, I mean, you hear that enough. You're like, all right, 6'7", can move like you just pointed out. He's a special athlete in terms of how he can get up and down the floor, his agility, and the fact that he is a elite passer along with that. I mean, yeah, the shot is obviously from everything you read, not a strength of his, but I mean, that whole Houston, he's going to, I can't tell if it's a great spot or a terrible spot for him, but he has a skill set that team does need. They have plenty of scoring. They have plenty of guys that are obviously great with the ball in their hands as scorers. You add him to the mix, a very serious minded, great passer, great size. I mean, it's probably, if he all pans out, a good scenario for him with the rest of those young guys over in Houston. Awesome.
All right, take the next one, DJ.
Yeah, so this is Daniel Dennison. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate you guys so much. Does the amount of low-hanging fruit in RJ's game make you more or less confident in the upside, specifically finishing, decision-making, and streaky three? What do you got there, Benji?
Yeah, I think that might be a bit of a generous use of the term low-hanging fruit, I suppose would be my response. We're not, he's not a rookie. He's been in the league now a few years. And he has made improvements in certain areas, and there are more improvements to be made that he will make. I wouldn't necessarily call them low-hanging fruit. Like, finishing is going to be an issue. Like, he's not a great finisher. He doesn't explode to the rim well enough to become a great finisher. I don't think that will ever happen. Can he incrementally improve? Does he need to develop more craft? A lot of it comes down to decision making, which is to your point, Daniel, and what shots you take, which I think the playoffs showed kind of what that balance and what the model should be. That to me is the low hanging fruit. Is really just the decision making.
I would agree, 100%.
The three ball, I don't think is low hanging fruit. It's going to be a challenge. Like, can he get back to where? Like, I don't know the answer. None of us really know. Like, I think he can shoot 36, 37%. I don't know. I think he can. But if he just, and I've said this since, his second year, and I think the playoffs was kind of proof of concept to me. Like, if he just translates some of the rim pressure into passing as opposed to tough rim looks, I think that answers two of those questions. The finishing will improve percentage-wise because he's taking better looks, and the assist numbers, decision making is automatically better if you're just using the driving gravity to get others looks the way Jimmy Butler does. Sometimes you play inside out instead of outside in. Get into the paint and then come out. Explore a DHO game like Jimmy does. There are so many things with that body, that size, the ability to get into the paint that he can leverage. That's the low-hanging fruit to me. And I think that makes me more confident in his upside, because the playoffs made me more confident in his upside because I saw it. I saw it for a stretch there where I thought, like, man, this guy is impacting winning at a high level with the way he's playing. So,
yeah, would you say the defense improvement is low-hanging fruit?
No, because I think he doesn't move that well. He doesn't.
What about just getting to where he was? I mean, because he was bad this year for most of the year. I think in the playoffs he was okay. Can he getting to okay consistently? It's
funny. I think I don't know what the metrics say. I have to go back, and you could tell me if you know. I thought his defense that year was a bit overrated.
Are you talking about his second year?
His second year, where he had Peyton and Bullock there to take the assignments. Right. So he was always on the weak. He was mostly on the weaker defenders. Like, Peyton always took the point guard. Bullock always took the tougher wing. It's like RJ wasn't asked to do all that much. He was mostly a weak side helper, which he's okay at. It might be his best kind of skill as a defender, but like, the more you ask of him on ball, and with Jalen Brunson, he's going to be asked to do more on ball because Jalen's always going to be on the worst. So I think it's less to do with him like regressing on that side of the ball, and more to do with a change in assignment and just exposing his weaknesses in a way that he hadn't had to deal with as much before. The last 2 years, I think. Although maybe this year was a little worse than last year. So there was some regression maybe, but like to me, it's just like he's not that good at moving laterally, and it's a challenge for him. So I wouldn't call it low-hanging fruit. I think he needs to improve. I think he will improve. I think he needs to at least get back to the level he was at last year, like in terms of just like effort, physicality, like that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I don't think it's low-hanging fruit necessarily.
Okay. Well, so here's another RJ thing that has just always has left me wanting more. And that's the fact that he doesn't use his body, his strength offensively enough. And I feel like it's a benefit because once he gets past you, once you're aligned with him hip to hip, it's very hard because he's so wide and so strong that it is so hard for a defender to sort of make up that ground and get back in front of him. He's going to have the advantage, but I don't see him like Jimmy. You watch Jimmy Butler, and he's just always using his strength. It's like sealing a guy down in the paint and getting an easy layup. It's going to the offensive glass. It's really putting a shoulder into someone and moving them. And I feel like that has never been, and you go back to Duke, it never was a thing that he did there either. It's like, I wouldn't call this low-hanging fruit because this just might be who he is as a basketball player. He's not a naturally physical player with the ball in his hands. And I feel like that is just something, I don't know if you've noticed that, but just one of those things where I just wish at his size and his strength, which it's there, and he actually moves pretty well. His first step, I think, is actually pretty good, but you rarely just see him go through someone, and it just I just wish it was something he go to every now and then.
Yeah, I think this is a guy who, for his entire life, has beat everybody to his left and finished with a one-handed scoop for his entire life. And I think the adjustment of someone who was able to do that forever and ever, and then all of a sudden can't do it consistently anymore because they're both their point of attack defenders are better, and because the help is NBA help. I think that's been the adjustment for him, and I do think he's gotten better. I mean, he puts guys on his hip now and then, and it's hard for them to get around him, and he's gotten better at that floater shot once he does that. Yes. But he too often opts, and I think he got better at this towards the end of the year and into the playoffs. Like, he too often just goes to the stock left-handed scoop shot that he's probably made his entire life, but now needs a little bit more arc because there's a 7-footer coming over, right, and a guy can rear view contest him, and they just don't go in as much or enough. And you're right. Like, the more he varies his finishing, the more he uses his right hand, the more he crosses back over to the other side. Like, it's not just straight line lefty scoop where he's not getting fouled. Right. He's flailing. He's going away from the rim. Like, 100%. Like,
he did have a couple of those. Yes. And he had those two left inside. Even if he's on the right side, he's not using his right hand because he's not comfortable going through someone with his right hand.
Yeah.
But that inside left-hand finish, which he did a couple of times against Cleveland, that is a fantastic move. And it's just, even though he's using the same dominant hand, he's doing it in a different way.
Yeah. And look, he's going to go ahead. Sorry.
No, you please. Go
ahead.
He
and what I thought he did well, and he's going to face so much of this as long as he's playing with Jalen Brunson, is like, they're going to put wings on Brunson and he's going to have point guards on him. And I did think in the playoffs, like when they put Garland or Mitchell, like his ability to get into the paint through the post, like back down, and get to a little lefty jump hook, or he has a little spin move now that he's added, like, keep improving on that stuff. That's a different way to use your physicality, but he's able to get into the paint pretty consistently, doesn't turn it over a lot, even though you'd think guys can kind of poke at it. He's good at just kind of securing the ball, getting into the paint and making a play. Again, try to translate that more into passing when the help comes, but like all that stuff, like vary the game more, less just straight line left drives, and more variation, using the strength, using the body. All of that, I think, can only benefit him. Oh, baby. Robert W. Cross. 53 wins. Thanks for the contribution, Robert. We love you. DJ loves you.
I love you.
I like you. Great to see you both. How do you put aside your burgeoning rivalry in film work to make sure that the audience of KFS comes first? Thanks. I'll hang up and listen. With difficulty, Robert. Yes. With great difficulty. That's my answer.
Listen, there's always, when you have a rivalry, right, it brings out the best in both of you.
Absolutely.
I mean, I will just say this. I've learned more working with Benji than I have in my, and this has only been like a year, not even a year. It's been 6 months, whatever it is. I've learned more from you just talking to you and just listening to you as much as I can than I have in my previous. I'm not even going to tell you how many years that is because I don't want to age myself right now, but many years. So it has been an absolute pleasure working with you. So I just have enjoyed the learning process because I just feel like you are the best going. So it's been doing stuff like this and just watching you and talking to you in the KFS chat and all that. So it's been just awesome for me. So is there a rivalry? Listen, I want to do the best for the brand and the channel, and that's is what it is. And we do work. There have been times where I've had to text you or message you like, hey, listen, I'm going to hit on this thing. What are you focusing on for this game or this preview? And we'll go back and forth and sort of make sure we're not going to hit on the same thing. But it's been great. I just have enjoyed it so much, and it's been a awesome experience, and just can't wait to keep doing it.
Damn. Thanks, man. Yeah, feelings mutual. There's no rivalry. It's a squad. It's a great squad that's getting better and better at what we do. We're just trying to, exactly like you said, Robert, audience comes first, and we're trying to give you guys everything that we can. Claudio, get at it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
I just want to say I'm so happy that DJ that you took Robert's question so seriously. I'm so happy that you like actually answered the question. What about the budding rivalry between you and Ben?
Because he's all about the audience. See,
all about the audience. Yes.
I wanted to join you guys for this next question because then we have to take a quick break. Okay. But this is from Fargo Tufo, also known as Alex. Shout out to the KFS Discord.
Oh God. Please read this, Andrew.
From Fargo Tufo, thank you for the contribution. Rumor has it that Mariah Mills tattooed Macri's name on her face. Does it signal the end of John in NYC? Your thoughts, Benji?
No. DJ, this is when the DJ goes first.
Do we have to give the backstory? I mean, do we have to provide any?
Listen. I usually don't do this. I explained the situation to John on Patreon the other day, but I'm gonna risk it and say no. You actually shouldn't Google Mariah Mills.
Not safe for work, please.
No, actually, go to Twitter. I think you're safe and look up Mariah Mills. Let's just say Zion.
What do you think? He all the Twitter people who manage, like, they're all fired. It's fair game over there now.
That's very true. That's very true.
There's no one working at Twitter anymore.
For those who don't know the joke, we apologize. If you know, you know. That's the most simple explanation that I could give. I will just say Jonathan Macri, as far as I know, will still be here tomorrow at noon with another episode of KFS Lunch Break. Ask him then and see what his answer
with Mariah Mills as his next guest.
Exactly.
That'll be elite content.
Tune in tomorrow night, Mariah Mills on the KFS YouTube channel. That is not happening.
Oh, hello. All right, next question. Good Lord.
Well, we actually, since this conversation, I think, has escalated to where I don't know how to spin that Mariah Mills is more than meets the eye, but you know who was more than meets the eye this past season, gentlemen? Julius Randle, an all-NBA player, an all-star, one of the best individual regular seasons in Knicks history, an Iron Man for most of it. And thanks to our friends at Oakley, we're going to tell you, Mr. Jonathan Macri, you could see him yourself if you'd like in just a second. Oakley's going to love this shout out. You're going to find out just how more than meets the eye Julius Randle was.
Hey, what's up? Jonathan Macri here with our good friends at Oakley to tell you why Julius Randle's All-NBA season was more than meets the eye. In scoring over 1,900 points this season, Randle moved into 20th place on the franchise's all-time scoring list. He also averaged just over 25 points a night, becoming the 7th Knick ever to do so. Finally, he became just the 57th player ever to top 57 points. How's that for some symmetry? Yes, we're disappointed by his playoff performance, but even so, this season from Julius Randle gave us more than meets the eye.
Thanks, Oakley. Thanks, Mariah. Next question, please. Emil Bauman-Soar. Absolutely. Thank you for the contribution, sir. How much would you guys give up for OG? I believe he was referring to OG Anunoby, formerly of Clutch, no longer of Clutch. If he's available, I think there's too much upside to his game to look past him. I think he can produce in a bigger role. DJ, your thoughts on OG Anunoby?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little lower on what he can do. Well, first of all, he's not going to – if the idea is you give OG more of a leash offensively, he's going to produce more. But if you bring him to the Knicks, is he not going to be in the same position in terms of usage, in terms of opportunity? So, that's not really going to allow him to blossom if there is some blossoming to be had for him. But I also am a little skeptical about him as an offensive ceiling guy. I see him as a guy that has a little bit more robotic movements in terms of his handle. I don't think he's a great shooter. I think he's fine. I think he's a good enough spot up shooter to space a defense, but I don't think he's a great shooter. I don't think he's treated that way. And I just don't know if there's a ton of offensive upside. Even if you were to say, listen, you are a second option, you are, whatever you are now going to be a 27, 28 usage guy. And it's not going to happen with the Knicks, because if you Knicks are going to bring him in, I assume it would be for an RJ type package, and then he's just going to be slotted into a similar spot as he is in Toronto. But in general, I'm a little lower on his ceiling as an offensive player. Now, defensively, he's great. He's as good as it gets in terms of the big 3-and-D wing that every team covets. Can guard probably at least 4 positions, maybe 5, depending on how big your center is. He's just a really good, a great defensive player. But I think his offensive ceiling is a little overrated, because I think the assumption is, because he's still relatively young, you give him more opportunity, it's going to produce more offense. It might give him more points, but I don't necessarily think he's going to be a hub for your offense, or a guy that's going to be your number 2 option on a really good team.
I agree with that. I don't look at him as someone who's going to ever be like a second option on a really good team offensively. I think he's a complementary piece. I think the question remains interesting even with that in mind, because how valuable would he be? You know, if you envision him in place of RJ or Randle, either or, does that make you better? Probably RJ more, because I think, again, we talked about Randle, the importance of Randle's production, consistency, regular season buoy that he is. But like, that's a really valuable player for this team, with Jalen Brunson as kind of your focal point, to have a wing who, as we talked about RJ's defensive limitations earlier, to have that guy, the most switchable wing possible, can take on the toughest assignment. You couple that with Grimes around. That's exactly the kind of defensive pairing you want around Jalen Brunson. So that is really interesting to me as a concept. And it would require moving RJ in that deal back to Canada, which would be interesting, and maybe something that both teams would be interested in. And would I do it? Oh man, I don't know.
You're gonna have to pay him, right? I mean, he is going to command a massive contract.
How much bigger is it going to be than RJ's current deal, though, if at all? I don't think it would be. I don't think he's getting anything more than that.
See, I think it would be bigger. I mean, I'd have to, like, what is a borderline all-star 3-and-D wing get?
I think around that. I really do. I think it's around. I think they're going to make similar money. That's why I think it's actually a feasible concept of a deal that could potentially be made, and make Knicks fans, some of them, very angry. But I don't think it's crazy. What about offensively? Do you think the fit is? It might be a little. He's a better shooter than RJ right now. Slightly. But no, his shooting doesn't.
You're losing, obviously, the rim pressure. I think you're probably losing a little bit of the playmaking, even though we know RJ's got some things to improve upon. But I think we both would say RJ is the better passer now and has a better ceiling as a playmaker. Is there a world where you want to have peak RJ in that spot offensively versus an OG and an Obi? And I'm just thinking.
No, there's a world, and
yeah,
no, it's not wrong or right. I think unless it depends on where you think RJ is going to get to. I think right now, OG's defense is more valuable than RJ's offense.
I agree, 100%.
So, especially in our team's context, where like Brunson can create a ton, Randle can create a ton. You have bench pieces that can create an IQ. You might look. We saw in the playoffs, RJ's kind of secondary ball handling creation was really important to the team, and they would miss it. I'm not saying they wouldn't miss it, but you transform your defense. The Knicks, like they were whatever they were, top 5 in defense 2 years ago and last year they at least ended the season as a top 10 defense. You know, I think they netted around somewhere average, right, at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Considering that their 2 best players and 2 biggest minute getters are Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, it's a minor miracle. Like, and they defended very well in the playoffs too. Wasn't the issue, right? So they are doing something right on the defensive end. I just questioned the sustainability of that with Brunson and Randle, and I do think, and sometimes I do conclude they're going to need better defense at the wing spot than what RJ is currently providing, which is why they often closed, although not in the playoffs as much, with IQ, right? Was to give them that real defensive pairing with Brunson, who is just always going to have to guard the worst perimeter player.
Yeah, and you said that now the second time, and it's so true. It is. I love him, and he's just a transcendent offensive player. He was in the playoffs at least, but that limitation right there, it just makes things harder.
It does
defensively, and it's just there's no easy answer, right? Obviously, both of us are on this. Get him off, put him on Vincent against the Heat. Get him off these big wings running around the court, but. Even in that, he's running through ball screens, and maybe it can get a little complicated getting through all those BAM illegal screens or whatever it is. But it just makes your alignment defensively harder when you have Jalen Brunson out there. It just is what it is, and it's something the Knicks will have to it'll just be a constant thing you have to consider. And it is probably the best argument to bring in a guy like Paul George or an OG Anunoby who can make up for those limitations.
Exactly right. It's less to do with like me being down on RJ or like it's just what we have Jalen Brunson, man. Like, and he has proven that he is worth building around and having in mind every decision that you make from here on out has to have him in mind. And in that sense, OG provides, I think, a lot of value. And I think if you asked me right now, which guy I'd rather have, I think I might say OG, and I might get shot by half of Knicks Twitter, but there I am. All right, let's move on. Next question.
Oh, some breaking news.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Some real breaking news.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. You want to take this one? Can you get through it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can get through it. So the Portland GM, Joe Cronin, has a big statement to make. He met with Damian Lillard, and he says, I quote, I met with Dame and Aaron Goodwin this afternoon. We had a great dialogue. We remain committed to building a winner around Dame. So Damian Lillard might not leave Portland. I repeat, but he might not.
Now listen, let me take this a little seriously for a second, because I think there's something that was left out of the statement that we should probably mention. A lot of we, and the we is the Trailblazers, right?
Theoretically,
we remain committed to building a winner around Dame. To me, that's a big. It wasn't, Damian Lillard and I, or we with Damian Lillard in mind, are committed to building a winner. This is the team's goal here. And I think we are in a situation where they're trying to save face. And I think it's going to happen. He's going to get moved. I think it's all trending towards that direction. I think now everyone's like, all right, it's a PR game. And I think that was a PR statement. And I think that Joe Cronin wants the Trailblazer fan base to know that they're committed at least. Now we don't know about Dame, right? There was nothing there about. So it'll be interesting to see when Chris Haynes has his Dame Lillard statement, if that will be coming or not. But
I'm just happy they had a great dialogue.
It was great.
Sounds like it was a great time. I'm sure it was fun and good times were had by all. Can we please, for God's sake, move on from this story? This never-ending saga that doesn't change for decades. Hamdy's back. What's up, Hamdy? So Jeremy has convinced us LaVine is the way to go. Oh, he's convinced you. Ugh, Jeremy. I actually agree with him. Your thoughts. Oh, God. Positioning me. That's a rivalry. Positioning me against Cohen.
I want to see that cage match.
Yes. The pale Jewish redheads going at it with fury. I actually agree with him. Your thoughts? I don't know. I wouldn't be. Jeremy has convinced me to the point where I wouldn't like throw something through my window if they did it. But I think I'd prefer running it back with what we have. That's where I come out. DJ?
Yeah, I think that. God, I vacillated between the keeping RJ, keeping the nucleus, keeping if it's Quickley or RJ, and running it back versus bringing in LaVine, because putting the contract stuff aside, I think that is a lot of where Jeremy's going with this, right? You bring LaVine in, he is a avenue for the next guy because of the salary matching abilities, and that he is what is the continuous soup that he always talks about. LaVine is a nice way to sort of get to the next level. In terms of him as a player, there are just very few guys in the league that can score the ball the way he can, as efficient as he can. And that is a very enticing thing when we've all watched RJ for the past 4 years struggle with that efficient scoring. And you bring in a guy like LaVine, and he is an elite catch and shoot guy. He's obviously got the downhill ability. The athleticism is obviously 99th percentile, probably still after knee surgeries and being in his mid-20s. I don't know, man. I'm copping out here. I don't know. It's like I can wake up tomorrow and be like, bring in LaVine, let's do this. And then the next day I'm like, listen, I want to see Quickley one more year. I want to see the low hanging fruit from RJ sort of bear some real fruit. And what can he be? Because there are some real limitations with LaVine. And we've talked a lot about defensively on this pod about the limitations of Brunson. Right. You add LaVine to that mix.
I mean, how much magic can Tibbs work with their three best players and biggest minute getters being Brunson, LaVine, and Randle? How are you getting a league average defense out of that?
Well, you were with RJ. That's the argument, right? You were with RJ.
RJ provides at least some physicality and size. Like LaVine is, I know it's gotten a little bit better, but man, that scares the, like, again, Knicks offense isn't perfect. Playoffs exposed it to some extent. This team was the third best offense in the league last year. They were an average defense. It's just adding LaVine get you better enough on offense that, like, let's say, again, max, you're going to be a league average defense with the. I struggle with that. It's not that simple an equation, but I struggle with that. So again, I think I prefer to run it back. But if they go that route, I think Jeremy, wise as he is, has convinced me that it is a viable and productive route to go. I can't get there.
So, I mean, Andrew puts in the chat here, does Chicago's defensive rating last year, which was good, give you hope that it's possible to build a good defense with him here? I mean, it's a good point. I mean, you had Vucevic in that lineup as well. I mean, is Caruso doing that much work on that end to sort of make up for whatever LaVine is not providing?
And it's not like DeRozan's a stalwart either, right?
Yeah. Patrick Williams, obviously a talented defensive player. I don't know if his on-court ability is necessarily where his ceiling is, right? Or could be. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean,
Donovan's a good defensive coach too.
Yeah. And is Mitch good enough to where, all right, so let's put it this way. Is Mitchell Robinson getting to the point where him alone is an average defense? His presence alone, and with the Hartenstein being, his backup.
And great bench defense that they always have, right? The minutes the bench are on the floor with Hart, assuming Hart's back and Quickley is always going to be a good defensive unit. We should assume.
Right. So yes, the starting lineup would have huge limitations, but are you getting enough from the center spot with Mitch? And then, as you just mentioned, rightfully, are you able to mix and match as the game moves on with a bench unit that has good defensive players in there to make it work? I mean, it's why we're talking about it, right? We didn't just throw it out the window, as you said.
It's a great point. It's a great point. All right. Yep. Robert's back. Big thread, Benjamin. Sorry for the delay in my second. Help me, DJ.
Super chat.
Super chat.
Of course, super chat. Not South Carolina. I was stuck behind a Bam Adebayo illegal screen. Aren't we all the time? Which Knick takes the leap next year and why? I already put out my opinion on that. I think it's Quentin Grimes. I think is a guy that's going to turn a lot of heads next year.
Yeah.
DJ.
So I'll go with RJ. I think the passing is real in terms of the ability to pass the ball and play make and make wise decisions. I think we've seen enough of it in spurts, and to do it against really good defenses, it gives me hope that it's a real thing. And to me, that might, because you always talk about, like, can you really flip the switch and go from a guy that struggles as a playmaker, as a decision maker, to being to have that being an actual attribute? yeah, I can see how you would question that, but maybe it was a skill or an attribute that was just there that he didn't tap into enough. So I'll say that ability will improve going into next year. And to me, that's a big improvement. And I think that the shooting will be better to the point where it's borderline league average. So I'll say the shooting he's roughly league average shooter from 3. The playmaking has improved to where he is a good offensive player on a good team. And to me, that would be a major, major leap for RJ. And if he's doing that, he is worth every penny of that contract and then some.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I love it. I hope it, dream it, pray for it.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert, on the Grimes point, just so I'm actually answering your question, and I kind of spoke to it before, I think playing with a little bit more cadence and pace and driving to finish, just the reps that he's going to get, I really like his chances to take the next step next year. Robert's back again. Oh, this one's for you, my friend.
All right. Hello, Mr. Ace. I appoint you GM of the Knicks. Wow. Feel so honored.
Congratulations.
The weight is hitting me already. My God. You are offered fair, reasonable value for number 30. Do you trade him? Why or why not? Fair, reasonable value. Listen,
that's the Robert Cross standard. It's fair and reasonable.
That is a tough question. This is what being the GM of the Knicks is like, right? You have to make all the tough calls.
No, Leon just sleeps, actually.
I don't know if right. Sorry about the thunder in the background. We have a major cell coming through the Chapel Hill area, so bear with me here as we dodge the lightning. It depends, right? Because who are you bringing in? Because there are certainly players that if you were to give me a reasonable offer that just fit with Jalen Brunson a little better, so yes, I would make a move for a guy like if you're saying trade, give me Paul George and you take Julius Randle. Yeah, I'm making that trade. But I mean, that's obviously not a viable thing. I don't think the Clippers would be interested in that sort of deal. So yeah, I would be certainly open to the idea. Now I don't, and we've talked a lot. You've talked about how the Knicks take care of their guys, the family part of it. It's real. So I think Julius is just, if you're going to, he's sitting at the head of that table, right? If it's like, he's got a plum seat at the table in this huge dysfunctional family. So you would probably have to, in a realistic world, give the Knicks not just fair value. You'd have to give them a surplus in value to make that move. But obviously I don't have those ties. So if you give me a player that is a 3-and-D sort of like big wing, 6'8", 6'9", that can do a lot of things, I am making that trade. I just am. But we're doing this. Obviously, this is a fictional scenario. I don't think it's got reasonable play in the real world. However, it's a good thought exercise about sort of roster construction and who do you want with Jalen Brunson long term. It's a really fascinating thought. So I think a guy that is a more diverse, defensive minded, but high level scorer kind of fits better with a Brunson, Grimes, RJ threesome.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. And fair and reasonable can be interpreted however anyone wants to interpret it. But I would not be devastated if this team moved off Julius Randle for whatever is fair and reasonable value. And you spoke to what that might look like and the best version of it. I'll just to not get in the weeds and just say, yes, I am okay moving off of Julius if the right deal presents itself. And we'll leave it there. All right, next question. Ben Kim Gervey is back. Why don't our bigs screen effectively? Is this on principle, fear of fouls, personnel? Also, no disrespect before Benji. I'm old. You're not old, Ben. That's just a social construct.
Yes.
What is age? You're doing great, Ben. You're doing great. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Our bigs don't screen effectively because screening is a skill, and towing the line of what is legal and illegal is a skill. And the fleeter of foot you are, like a Bam, for example, the easier it is to kind of get in and out of screens and tow that line effectively. Mitch a bit more clumsy in his movements. And so if he takes risks as a screener, he's going to get called more often. That's a big part of it. It's a read, and it's a read and react, and when to flip the screen. When Mitch has gotten better, I just don't think he'll ever be great at it. And I think that's okay. I think they get away with it. They do enough. It would obviously help if they hit their screens more often. I think varying the screener a little bit would help too, and giving some other people opportunities. Even an RJ, for example, would be interesting as a screener, which they never do. So I think it's technique. I think it's personnel. I don't think it's fear of fouls, although it does play in for a Mitch. I think all those things are true, Ben. Actually, I think they all play some part in the ineffective screening that plagues the Knicks at times.
Yeah, and would you say the best, because he started to do it a little more in the playoffs, but to me, Quickley, I love when he screens, because to me he is a phenomenal screener, especially for a guard. So I just, we were talking about screening. He just his screen just sort of streaming through my mind in that Cleveland series, because it became such a weapon, and him in that short roll making plays. I mean, it's something they went to because of how Cleveland was playing Brunson, but I hope it's not something that is not utilized this coming season, because I really do think it's a valuable skill that a lot of teams do. It's not the Knicks aren't breaking the mold doing it. They just haven't utilized those skill sets that at least Quickley has. I think Grimes has it a little bit, but Quickley especially. And
I'd add, I think Josh Hart's a very good screener as well.
Yeah,
if he's back, and they used him in the playoffs a lot as well.
Yeah, I would agree.
Jessica, what's up, Jessica? Always good to hear from you. Ben and Ace, without naming names, what are the worst NBA-related tweets you've seen during the offseason so far? My answer is anything about whether Dame is loyal or wants to leave. Any of those tweets, they're all awful. They all stink. I hate all of them. DJ, please.
I'm just trying to figure out how much trouble I want to get myself into.
Oh, Ryan Mills, is that where we're going?
No, not that kind of trouble. Not. Have we met the quota? I mean, there's 4 or 5 mentions of Ryan Mills on the pod. I think whoever had the over on that, you win. Listen, I think there are. I follow a lot of guys, a lot of girls, a lot of on NBA Twitter. A lot of them are Knicks fans, and I feel like there is I won't name names. I feel like there was a lot of revisionist history regarding the Josh Hart trade, and I feel like there are a lot of people sitting there on draft night, bored out of their mind. I tweeted this, and I feel like the last time we saw Josh Hart, he was a guy that Jalen Brunson didn't want to pass the ball to in the biggest moment of the season. So I get it. There are real limitations. He is not a perfect player, but I feel like they were not in that position without him. I feel like he changed a lot of what they do defensively, even offensively. I really feel like the idea that the Knicks traded a pick late in the first round for a guy that helped them and a guy that they have the ability to re-sign was the definition of revisionist history. And to me, that was those tweets were all the worst. So I feel like,
with the fair assumption, by the way, that they would have a pick anyway, and with some real chicanery, they ended up not having.
Right.
So I think it's all.
A lot had to happen for them not to actually have a pick on draft night. It was a reasonable. It was a strong move to make at the time. You have the information you have at the time when you make a decision.
Correct me if I'm wrong. They went 9-0 after he got there. Am I making that up? Am I forgetting?
It was long, man, and
they won a lot of games.
They won a lot of games, and Obi Toppin was a different player with Josh Hart in terms of the transition ability. I mean, he's their best, one of their best defensive players on the ball. I mean, he's a really good player. I'm glad to have him. Limitations and warts aside, he is a good basketball player, and you just need those, and you need to win the regular season to, as we've talked about, to get the seeds to get to the point where you can actually make noise in the playoffs. So,
and let's ignore the fact that he made the biggest shot in the playoffs for the Knicks. He made a step back 3 to win a game, basically, and all the contributions he made against Cleveland. Let's just ignore those. And because his shooting limitations absolutely mattered against Miami, And everybody knew that might happen as the level got higher and higher of competition. And that is a real concern to think about and how you plan around it. But let's not get to a place where we think that the second round of the playoffs is a guarantee and we need to just think about how we're going to – Josh Hart's going to win you games in the regular season to get you back to where you want to get to.
Exactly.
And that needs to be part of – like, don't think that this team is now a given second round of playoffs team. As much as we've said the East is wide open, there are also a lot of good teams in the East. The Knicks are not, like, far and away more talented than most of the teams there. Like, it's going to take a lot. And it's going to get back to that place to get a seed where you have home court advantage in the first round and can do what you did. Like, Josh Hart's going to help you get there. Sorry. G-Mac said stop hitting the desk. I'm passionate, G-Mac. It's 11:03 and I'm passionate.
I said please.
In parentheses.
Next question. Robert Cross. A follow-up on Jessica's question. What is the worst Kevin Danishevsky tweets you have seen in the offseason thus far? You're welcome. I have not seen any bad Kevin Danishevsky tweets because Kevin Danishevsky, let me tell you something. Kevin Danishevsky is a smart basketball mind and an amazing supporter of our team here, part of our team here. And we love Kevin Danishevsky. I have not seen one bad Kevin Danishevsky tweet, Robert.
Do not exist. They do not exist. Robert trying to start trouble.
I'll answer the question. All of them have been bad, Robert. Don't worry. All of them have been.
Does he tweet about the Mets?
Those are the bad ones.
Yeah, stuff. Okay.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Good. Frank Sound, KFS Death lineup tonight. Hell yeah. Thank you, Frank Sound. We appreciate it. We're trying our best here. Jay Berg. I hypothesized Leon's thinking Spider in 2025 as a trade or through free agency. If so, which attainable stars at wing/center pair best with a Brunson Spider backcourt? Championship ceiling ?
Oof. Wow. I mean, I hope Leon is not planning. I think that is certainly part of the equation. Now I do question because Brunson is going to need an extension. Randle will be up for an extension as well. So it would have to be a trade, I presume, in terms of salary numbers. But putting that aside, I mean, I think Mitch would be a phenomenal. Because, I mean, you just look at, if you just compare that to the Utah backcourt, Connolly and Mitchell, Mitch is a decent facsimile of what Gobert can do. Obviously, a guy like Anunoby, as we've talked about, because you obviously would need that big 6'7", 6'8" wing that can have the versatility defensively to make up for a pairing in the backcourt that is obviously going to leave a lot to be desired. Now, it's hard to know in 2 years who those guys will be, but that's sort of the players I would you'd want a defensive, obviously a rim protector. You would need that. It would be to me, in my opinion, that would be a prerequisite. You would need a rim protector of at least upper echelon level to get a passable defense. And then you'd want obviously as much defensive wing versatility as you can.
Yeah, I'd also look. You mentioned Utah. I'd look at the current Cleveland roster for inspiration there as well. They built a really, really excellent defense around Garland and Mitchell. And I think Garland is actually maybe a little better than Brunson defensively, at least as a ball hawk and on the ball. Although I think Brunson does, he draws more charges and does that kind of thing. So, but I don't think there's a huge gap there. I think to build a great defense around that specific backcourt, you're going to require buy-in, like real buy-in from Brunson and Mitchell, which the Cavs really got from Garland and Mitchell this year. And then you need to surround them with size, strength, rim protection. And they did it with Okoro, Mobley, and Allen in Cleveland. It's hard to find that kind of rim protection at the 4 and the 5. That's pretty hard to copy, but certainly that's the idea and the blueprint. And Mitch is certainly a good option there. And I don't think it can be RJ and Randle, though. That I don't think. I
agree with that. Now, did the way Cleveland season ended and how the Knicks were able to take advantage of their size in the backcourt, does that give you pause that a small backcourt of that nature there's a ceiling on that? So if you are going to look to try to win a title with that as your backcourt, now I could be missing a team, but I don't know necessarily that's been done before where you actually win a title with a backcourt of 6'2" and under?
I don't know off the top of my head if I've seen it. How tall was How tall was Joe Dumars?
Literally what I'm
6'4".
looking up, Benji.
I think he was listed as 6'4".
Yeah, pretty small backcourt, but obviously pretty tenacious players in a different kind of way.
He was a great defensive player,
Yes,
and to me, it's like you could get away with that a little more in that era where you just didn't have obviously the size.
But also like they surrounded those two guys with physicality and size, obviously. Right. It's funny because I didn't think Cleveland lost that series on the defensive side of the ball. They didn't score the way they should have been scoring. Now that came more down to the fact that Mobley and Allen, I think, is problematic as a pairing offensively than it did to Garland and Mitchell being a problem defensively. I don't think the Knicks took a ton of advantage of it. They did a pretty good job. They got Brunson the mismatches. RJ abused the mismatches at times. But honestly, their best method of offense in that series was Mitchell Robinson offensive rebounding. So it didn't prove to me that it's not viable defensively.
Okay, fair point.
I think
and Dumars 6'3". Thank you. Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, more than anything, it proved to me that I think Mobley needs to shoot if they want to stay with that pairing down low.
You think he shoots long term?
I'll say yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Enough touch,
and that's not. And that doesn't mean that he'll shoot enough. I don't know if he'll shoot enough to make that pairing, or at least that pairing playing 30 minutes together. Like it might be more of like an Allen starts and Mobley finishes when he gets the size to actually play center, and you can build around it that way. But I think he'll make shots. Yeah, I do. Hey, Ray, just joining. I'm late. Does a bigger role for Deuce make sense? It's a great question.
It's now, there's no minutes.
Yeah, that's the question. That's the question.
If you consolidate, I think he's ready. I mean, I know you agree. He's ready for NBA rotation minutes tomorrow. I mean, he could play 15 minutes a night, and I think be a positive player because I think he's just going to shoot well enough. I think there's enough history with his shooting in college. I think he's going to shoot it fine. I just think defensively, he just changes everything. He just changes the game the moment he is on the court. And I think he could, if you consolidate and you have 15 minutes a night, 10 minutes a night to play Deuce McBride, I think he can play. And right now, I just don't think it's not there right now for him.
Yeah. Assuming they bring back Hart.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? It's an interesting phrasing. It makes sense. Like, I think he's earned it. I think he can help you. If Tibbs was a bit more of a flexible type of coach, you could see it being kind of matchup dependent. That's not how he coaches. And like, he has his 9-man and then situational guys around that. And that's what it's probably going to be next year. I think Deuce is ready for minutes. I'll also just say though, like on the positive side of it, Deuce is a guy that I know can be the 10th man, play situationally with injuries or whatever, and make a tremendous impact, which is really important in an NBA where not everyone's going to play every game. Like, he's going to get opportunities next year, whether he's in the rotation day one or not. And the luxury of having a guy like him to plug and play whenever you need to, and who's going to make an impact. Hell, he made an impact in playoff games this year. Like, this is a guy who's ready to take that challenge. It's a tremendous luxury for the team to have a guy that you drafted in the second round that can make that kind of impact and in situational scenarios. And as much as I'd love to see him play more, I can also kind of focus on the luxury that the Knicks do have to have him in that role.
That's a good point. And, the Knicks have been really lucky with injuries the last few years. Quickley, RJ. I know Grimes had the knee injury, but it was relatively healthy last year. There's going to be a time where there's going to be an injury, and you're right. You need that 10th man to be ready. And he seems like a very professional player at his young age who's
like
always ready.
There's almost a likelihood that he's going to play like 25, 30 games next year.
Yeah.
And that's no small thing, right? So it's a great luxury to have. Thanks, Ray. All right. That does it. An amazing Monday night live stream. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, DJ, for joining me. It was great. It was great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure. This has been awesome. Obviously, if you guys aren't following the great DJ Zullo, please do. One of the most I'm just gonna say best because that doesn't mean anything, but one of the most detail oriented, sees the minutia of the game in a really unique way. Great on the telestrator, great. It adds a video editing element to our team that is like really valuable, helps you see the game in a different way. So if you're not following DJ, fix that immediately. The whole team, obviously, KFS is doing great work, even in the off season. Even though I'm not doing that much right now. But thank you all for coming, tuning in. This was a blast. DJ, anything you want to say before we head out?
No, man. Just likewise, follow Benji. He's as good as it gets. I'll say it again. I learn every day from him. This has been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. I just appreciate what you guys do.
Have a good night, everybody. Dame Lillard, breaking news. He might leave. He might leave Portland.
Let me just add 2 things. They both said to follow each other, but didn't say where. So you can follow Benji at Ben Ritholtz NBA on Twitter. You can also follow DJ at Ace_Zullo. And because DJ does such great work for us, he also does great work on his personal channel at Craft NBA. So you can check that out, give that a like and subscribe. Find all his great work there. And then tomorrow, our schedule at noon, another edition of KFS Lunch Break with John Macri. So bring all your questions there, Mariah Mills or not. And then we've got Chris Persianen and Jeremy Cohen on Tuesday nights for another edition.
Big week.
A very big week. We're live every day and every night.
KPJC combo?
Indeed.
Sheesh.
And I'm going to tease it. A non-KFS member, but friend of the pod, will be our live host on Wednesday. If you really think about it.
Is he in the bag or out of the bag?
I think, let's just say he's fond of poetry. Okay. We learned that today with a thing he might have written. So tune in on Wednesday night for that. We got the casuals obviously on Thursday, and then our big free agency live stream on Friday. So plenty of live stream, plenty of coverage this off season. And one last reminder, DJ Zullo is not an actual DJ.
Sorry,
Important
everyone.
note.
Oh, one actual last reminder. Damian Lillard might not leave Portland. Okay. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye, everybody.
Peace.